Originally, I'm from Turkey. I have been a citizen since 1993. I came to the United States in 1988 to go to university, and I got married, and I have been living here since. Well, I lived in several countries. I lived in Iran, I lived in Turkey, and equally, I would say 9 years in Turkey, 7 years in Iran, and on and off a year and a half in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Authoritarian.
Well, authoritarian regime in Azerbaijan is not much different than the rest of the nations, these new nations since the fall of the Soviet Union in the region, the Central Asia and Caucasus. Of course, we hear only very tiny amount, again, because of geopolitical reasons, about these atrocities that are being committed in those countries, whether it's Azerbaijan or if it's Turkmenistan or if it's Kazakhstan. You are looking at the dictator families ruling their nations. They are ridden with censorship, torture, corruption, and it's the norm. It's the way of life. And again, you will not get to see or read about the realities on the ground in those nations, unfortunately, because of their geopolitical situation, positioning, and oil, gas, those commodities, they tend to get in the way of notions that we supposedly value in this country. Yeah, I have been reading about the conflict, and again, we have similar conflicts in elsewhere in other parts of the nation. What really concerns me the most important aspect of this is the hypocrisy that I witness and I see, and I've been witnessing, especially with some inside knowledge of what takes place in the United States. You know, you can, a nation that points finger and says, this is Saddam Hussein, this is Iraq, they have WMD, and they have committed some, and this is Saddam's people, some atrocities against the Kurds in northern Iraq. And you pause and say, well, how about atrocities that have been continuously taking place right there north of Iraq? Why that is never being played and mentioned? And for me, it becomes a policy issue, it becomes an issue of stand, and it becomes the problem of hypocrisy. And this problem of hypocrisy comes with its own implications and effects, and I think the entire world suffers as a result. So that is my angle and how I view it, not only in terms of conflict there between Azerbaijan and Turkey, but what is taking place here and what is being presented to the world, whether it's through the media under the pressure or through political decision and lobbying decisions here in the United States. Because Armenia is just so isolated there. Yeah. Because when you're looking at many of these nations there, it's not only Azerbaijan, you're looking at Turkic countries. Their language is Turkic-driven, and they're Muslims, their religion in, when you go to look at Kyrgyzstan and you look at Turkmenistan, looking at all the Turkic countries, and of course with the United States being its track record of siding with Turkey and the Turkic nations, it's an isolated situation, strategic positioning that it has that without Russia would not exist, and it would not exist. Sure, Armenia is vulnerable today because it's sitting there in a very, very isolated position. When you look at the map and when you look at the region, you look at all the new nations since the fall of the Soviet Union, since 1991, it's surrounded by Turkic-speaking nations. And as a small country, other than Russia, really Armenia hasn't had any allies or protectors in the region. And just the geopolitical strategic location it has alone screams that vulnerability. And in this particular chessboard with that region, you're looking at Russia as the only one that Armenia can count on. And if I were Armenia, I would never ever try to align myself with the United States, really, because they will be betrayed, as Kurds have been betrayed. over and over and over again. Every time there is a war in the region, United States, they go and they use Kurds as allies. Before them, Brits did the same thing. Israel does it against Iran. They go and they form, these alliances with the Kurds. But then when the push comes to shove and Turkey does something, they all stand aside and they're like, go ahead and do it and massacre them. So then they get betrayed. So I think they only have one ally, and it's Russia, and they have to play that card right. That's my personal opinion. I'm not an expert, but really this just goes so much into what is being used, because I don't think really religion has anything to do with it. No. As far as U.S. is concerned, for the countries in the region, of course it does. It is about religion. It is Turkey and Armenian. It's the Muslims versus Armenian. It's not only the ethnic thing, it's also along religious lines. And I agree with that. So that's a different story. But with U.S. and United States view and angle, I don't think they could care less. And I don't think that becomes a factor. Turkey is more important. So it's more profitable. And strategically, there's more gain. Heck, with humanitarian reasons, who cares? When have they cared about humanitarian reason? Really, I'm trying to think historically. Okay, none. I can't come up with anything. I know exactly what you're asking here. And again, it boils down to that hypocrisy we were talking about, because when they look at it not from the moral or humanitarian angle, and it's all about geopolitical strategies and gain. And for that, they tolerate, and in some cases, they aid and abet genocide or genocidal activities. Then turn around to their population, nations, such as the United States government, and say, we are doing this, but we are doing this for national security reason. We are doing this for sensitive diplomatic relations. We are doing this because we have this war on terror, and sometimes we have to do evil deeds because the end justifies the means. None of those are justification. These are the PR, the spin, the excuses attached in order to justify it for their own people, and in this case, in the United States. Because, if you just look at the Saudi Arabia's case and what's happening to women there, okay, the treatment. Ordinarily, if they didn't have oil, and if they were maybe somewhere in the Western Africa, we would have seen so many NGOs, so many people, and so many articles coming depicting the horrors being implemented in Saudi Arabia. But you don't see that. It pops up once in a while. You don't see that because they are being shielded from that kind of exposure, and that's the hypocrisy. And they would cite, okay, maybe citing oil is going to be a shallow reason for some people. It's not as good. But hey, war on terror is, we have a base in Saudi Arabia. Look at all the countries, terrorist countries there. And for your national security, the United States citizens, and for your own national interest, we are going to look the other way. And doing that with all these massacres, doing that with all the genocides, basically showing that, you had Armenian genocide, then you had Hitler's Germany, we have had Cambodia, we had atrocities being committed against Kurds by Saddam Hussein at some points, by Iranian government at some points, by Turkish government continuously. And despite all the history, all the Oscar-winning movies, all these books that have written, yet today we are still doing the same thing. And we would allow the same thing to take place because the interests, the powers want to justify it in the names of geopolitical interests or certain gains, and they do it as national security or sensitive diplomatic relations.